Section 1 of Bird Stories from Burroughs by John Burroughs. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sandra. Bird Stories from Burroughs by John Burroughs. Section 1. The Bluebird. It is sure to be a bright March morning when you first hear the bluebird's note, and it is as if the milder influences above have found a voice and let a word fall upon your ear, so tender is it and so prophetic, a hope tinged with a regret. There never was a happier or more devoted husband than the male bluebird. He is the gay champion and escort of the female at all times, and while she is sitting he feeds her regularly. It is very pretty to watch them building their nest. The male is very active in hunting out a place and exploring the boxes and cavities, but seems to have no choice in the matter, and is anxious only to please and encourage his mate, who has the practical turn and knows what will do and what will not. After she has suited herself, he applauds her immensely, and away the two go in quest of material for the nest, the male acting as guard and flying above and in advance of the female. She brings all the material and does all the work of building, he looking on and encouraging her with gesture and song. He acts also as inspector of her work, but I fear is a very partial one. She enters the nest with her bit of dry grass or straw, and having adjusted it to her notion, withdraws and waits nearby, while he goes in and looks it over. On coming out, he exclaims very plainly, "Excellent, excellent," and away the two go again for more material. I was much amused one summer day in seeing a bluebird feeding her young one in the shaded street of a large town. She had captured a cicada or harvest fly, and after bruising it a while on the ground, flew with it to a tree and placed it in the beak of the young bird. It was a large morsel, and the mother seemed to have doubts of her chick's ability to dispose of it, for she stood near and watched its efforts with great solicitude. The young bird struggled valiantly with the cicada, but made no headway in swallowing it, when the mother took it from him and flew to the sidewalk, and proceeded to break and bruise it more thoroughly. Then she again placed it in his beak and seemed to say, "There, try it now," and sympathized so thoroughly with his efforts that she repeated many of his motions and contortions. But the great fly was unyielding, and indeed seemed ridiculously disproportioned to the beak that held it. The young bird fluttered and screamed, "I'm stuck, I'm stuck," till the anxious parent again seized the morsel and carried it to an iron railing, where she came down upon it for the space of a minute with all the force and momentum her beak could command. Then she offered it to her young a third time, but with the same result as before, except that this time the bird dropped it. But she reached the ground as soon as the cicada did, and taking it in her beak, flew a little distance to a high board fence, where she sat motionless for some moments. While pondering the problem how that fly should be broken, the male bluebird approached her and said very plainly, and I thought rather curtly, "Give me that bug." But she quickly resented his interference and flew farther away, where she sat apparently quite discouraged when I last saw her. One day in early May, Ted and I made an expedition to the Chautauqua, a still, dark, deep stream that loiters silently through the woods not far from my cabin. As we paddled along, we were on the alert, for any bit of wildlife of bird or beast that might turn up. There were so many abandoned woodpecker chambers in the small dead trees as we went along that I determined to secure the section of a tree containing a good one to take home and put up for the bluebirds. "Why don't the bluebirds occupy them here?" inquired Ted. "Oh," I replied, "bluebirds do not come so far into the woods as this. They prefer nesting places in the open and near human habitations." After carefully scrutinizing several of the trees, we at last saw one that seemed to fit the bill. It was a small dead tree trunk, 7 or 8 inches in diameter, that leaned out over the water, and from which the top had been broken. The hole, round and firm, was 10 or 12 feet above us. After considerable effort, I succeeded in breaking the stub off near the ground and brought it down into the boat. "Just the thing," I said. "Surely the bluebirds will prefer this to an artificial box." But lo and behold, it already had bluebirds in it. We had not heard or sound or seen a feather till the trunk was in our hands, when on peering into the cavity we discovered 2 young bluebirds about half grown. This was a predicament indeed. Well, the only thing we could do was to stand the tree trunk up again as well as we could, and as near as we could to where it had stood before. This was no easy thing, but after a time we had it fairly well replaced, one end standing in the mud of the shallow water, and the other resting against a tree. This left the hole to the nest about 10 feet below and to one side of its former position. Just then we heard the voice of one of the parent birds, and we quickly paddled to the other side of the stream, 50 feet away, to watch her proceedings, saying to each other, "Too bad, too bad." The mother bird had a large beetle in her beak. She alighted upon a limb a few feet above the former site of her nest, looked down upon us, uttered a note or two, and then dropped down confidently to the point in the vacant air where the entrance to her nest had been but a few moments before. Here she hovered on the wing a second or two, looking for something that was not there, and then returned to the perch she had just left, apparently not a little disturbed. She hammered the beetle rather excitedly upon the limb a few times, as if it were in some way at fault, then dropped down to try for her nest again. Only vacant air there. She hovers and hovers, her blue wings flickering in the checkered light. Surely that precious hole must be there. But no. Again she is baffled, and again she returns to her perch and mauls the poor beetle till it must be reduced to a pulp. Then she makes a third attempt, then a fourth and a fifth and a sixth, till she becomes very much excited. What could have happened? Am I dreaming? Has that beetle hoodooed me? She seems to say, and in her dismay she lets the bug drop and looks bewilderedly about her. Then she flies away through the woods calling. "Going for her mate," I said to Ted. "She is in deep trouble and she wants sympathy and help." In a few minutes we heard her mate answer, and presently the 2 birds came hurrying to the spot, both with loaded beaks. They perched upon the familiar limb above the site of the nest, and the mate seemed to say, "My dear, what has happened to you? I can find that nest." And he dived down and brought up in the empty air, just as the mother had done. How he winnowed it with his eager wings, how he seemed to bear onto that blank space. His mate sat regarding him intently, confident, I think, that he would find the clue. but he did not. Baffled and excited, he returned to the perch beside her. Then she tried again. Then he rushed down once more. Then they both assaulted the place, but it would not give up its secret. They talked, they encouraged each other, and they kept up the search, now one, now the other, now both together. Sometimes they dropped down to within a few feet of the entrance to the nest, and we thought they would surely find it. No, their minds and eyes were intent only upon that square foot of space where the nest had been. Soon they withdrew to a large limb many feet higher up, and seemed to say to themselves, "Well, it is not there, but it must be here somewhere. Let us look about." A few minutes elapsed when we saw the mother bird spring from her perch and go straight as an arrow to the nest. Her maternal eye had proved the quicker. She had found her young. Something like reason and common sense had come to her rescue. She had taken time to look about, and behold, there was that precious doorway. She thrust her head into it, then sent back a call to her mate, then went further in, then withdrew. Yes, it is true. They are here, they are here. Then she went in again, gave them the food in her beak, and then gave place to her mate, who, after similar demonstrations of joy, also gave them his morsel. Ted and I breathed freer. A burden had been taken from our minds and hearts, and we went cheerfully on our way. We had learned something too. We had learned that when in the deep woods you think of bluebirds, bluebirds may be nearer than you think. One mid-April morning, 2 pairs of bluebirds were in very active and at times violent courtship about my grounds. I could not quite understand the meaning of all the fuss and flutter. Both birds of each pair were very demonstrative, but the female in each case the more so. She followed the male everywhere, lifting and twinkling her wings, and apparently seeking to win him by both word and gesture. If she was not telling him by that cheery, animated, confiding, softly endearing speech of hers, which she poured out incessantly, how much she loved him, what was she saying? She was constantly filled with a desire to perch upon the precise spot where he was sitting, and if he had not moved away, I think she would have alighted upon his back. Now and then, when she flitted away from him, he followed her with like gestures and tones and demonstrations of affection, but never with quite the same ardour. The 2 pairs kept near each other, about the house, the bird boxes, the trees, the posts and vines in the vineyard, filling the ear with their soft, insistent warbles, and the eye with their twinkling azure wings. Was it this constant presence of rivals on both sides that so stimulated them and kept them up to such a pitch of courtship? Finally, after I had watched them over an hour, the birds began to come into collision. As they met in the vineyard, the 2 males clinched and fell to the ground, lying there for a moment with wings sprawled out, like birds brought down by a gun. Then they separated, and each returned to his mate, warbling and twinkling his wings. Very soon the females clinched and fell to the ground and fought savagely, rolling over and over each other, clawing and tweaking and locking beaks and hanging on like bull terriers. They did this repeatedly. Once one of the males dashed in and separated them by giving one of the females a sharp tweak and blow. Then the males were at it again, their blue plumage mixing with the green grass and ruffled by ruddy soil. What a soft, feathery, ineffectual battle it seemed in both cases. No sound, no blood, no flying feathers, just a sudden mixing up and general disarray of blue wings and tails, and ruddy breasts, there on the ground, assault but no visible wounds, thrust of beak and grip of claw, but no feather loosened, and but little ruffling, long holding of one down by the other, but no cry of pain or fury. It was the kind of battle that one likes to witness. The birds usually locked beaks and held their grip half a minute at a time. One of the females would always alight by the struggling males and lift her wings and utter her soft notes. But what she said, whether she was encouraging one of the bluecoats, or berating the other, or imploring them both to desist, or egging them on, I could not tell. So far as I could understand her speech, it was the same that she had been uttering to her mate all the time. When my bluebirds dashed at each other with beak and claw, their preliminary utterances had to my ears anything but a hostile sound. Indeed, for the bluebird to make a harsh, discordant sound seems out of the question. Once, when the two males lay upon the ground with outspread wings and locked beaks, a robin flew down by them, and for a moment gazed intently at the blue splash upon the grass, and then went his way. As the birds drifted about the grounds, first the males, then the females rolling on the grass, or in the dust in fierce combat, and between times the members of each pair assuring each other of undying interest and attachment, I followed them, apparently quite unnoticed by them. Sometimes they would lie more than a minute upon the ground, each trying to keep his own, or to break the other's hold. They seemed so oblivious of everything about them that I wondered if they might not, at such times, fall an easy prey to cats and hawks. Let me put their watchfulness to the test, I said. So as the two males clinched again and fell to the ground, I cautiously approached them, hat in hand. When 10 feet away and unregarded, I made a sudden dash and covered them with my hat. The struggle continued for a few seconds under there, then all was still. Sudden darkness had fallen upon the field of battle. What did they think had happened? Presently their heads and wings began to brush the inside of my hat. Then all was still again. Then I spoke to them, called to them, exulted over them, but they betrayed no excitement or alarm. Occasionally a head or body came in gentle contact with the top or the sides of my hat. But the two females were evidently agitated by the sudden disappearance of their contending lovers, and began uttering their mournful alarm note. After a minute or two, I lifted one side of my hat and out darted one of the birds. Then I lifted the hat from the other. One of the females then rushed, apparently with notes of joy and congratulation, to one of the males, who gave her a spiteful tweak and blow. Then the other came, and he served her the same. He was evidently a little bewildered, and not certain what had happened, or who was responsible for it. Did he think the two females were in some way to blame? But he was soon reconciled to one of them again, as was the other male with the other. Yet the two couples did not separate till the males had come into collision once more. Presently, however, they drifted apart, and each pair was soon holding an animated conversation, punctuated by those pretty wing gestures about the two bird boxes. These scenes of love and rivalry had lasted nearly all the forenoon, and matters between the birds apparently remained as they were before, the members of each pair quite satisfied with each other. One pair occupied one of the bird boxes in the vineyard, and reared 2 broods there during the season. But the other pair drifted away and took up their abode somewhere else. The Bluebird. A wistful note from out the sky, pure, pure, pure in plaintive tone, as if the wanderer were alone and hardly knew to sing or cry. But now a flash of eager wing, flitting, twinkling by the wall, and pleading sweet and amorous call. Ah, now I know his heart doth sing. O bluebird, welcome back again, thy azure coat and ruddy vest are hues that April loveth best, warm skies above the furrowed plain. The farm boy hears thy tender voice, and visions come of crystal days, with sugar camps in maple ways, and scenes that make his heart rejoice. The lucid smoke drifts on the breeze, the steaming pans are mantling white, and thy blue wings a joyous sight among the brown and leafless trees. Now loosened currents glance and run, and buckets shine on sturdy bowls. The forest folk peep from their holes, and work his play from sun to sun. The downy beats his sounding limb, the nuthatch pipes his nasal call, and robin, perched on tree-top tall, heavenward lifts his evening hymn. Now go and bring thy homesick bride, persuade her here is just the place to build a home and found a race in Downey's cell, my lodge beside. End of section 1.